So this evening for our Sangha night talk, we are looking at a text, a really important text in Buddhism called the 7-Point Mind Training, or Lojong. We've got copies of the text by the door, so if you don't get one earlier in the series, do take one as you're going past. And it's a text that originates in India with Atisha, and then Atisha brought it into Tibet, and it's become a big part of Tibetan Buddhism, and through that, other forms of Buddhism as well. And we're studying it for the current series at Sangha night. And training the mind goes right back to the historical Buddha, the Dhammapada, the earliest verses. All about the importance of training your mind, how to train your mind, and the danger of a mind that is untrained, and the power of a mind that is trained. So training the mind and the heart is key to Buddhism. It's what Buddhism is, you could say. And this text is a particular text that condenses how to train the mind and the heart to become the heart and mind of a bodhisattva. And a bodhisattva, Sanghagita says, is the ideal Buddhist. It's the Buddhist who all their energies are devoted to enlightenment and to awakening, but not just for themselves, for all beings. So the bodhisattva ideal really emphasizes altruism and compassion, whereas other schools have maybe lost sight of that. This tradition, this text, re-emphasizes the altruistic aspect and compassion. So we're training our mind, whether you know it or not, we're training our mind in liberation for ourselves, but by the nature of reality, that also benefits everyone that we come into contact with. So we're benefiting all beings as well as ourselves. So everybody wins. So we're training our mind, and we've been working our way through this text, and some of the slogans are straightforward. Some of them need unpacking, and we've been unpacking some of them. And this evening, we're going to have two shortish talks from Sanghagita and myself, and we're going to be talking about two key slogans. So within this text, there were sections where there were very pokey, potent slogans, and the slogans are a way of condensing a lot of meaning into some easy to remember phrase that you can remember and take away to practice. And if you're here last week, we were invited to try and make some change in our lives by Vimala Dasa, and quite a lot of us have been working on that this week, making change happen. And what you might have discovered, and we can talk about this in the groups, is it's easy to forget. It's easy to forget that you made this, what it is that you're trying to do. And having a slogan is a really good way to memorize and take to heart a lot of Dharma meaning. So this evening we're going to be exploring two of the important slogans from this text. Sangha, and you've got two more cards to add to your collection. So if you come into Sangha each week, you can collect the whole set of the cards. If not, you have to swap them with people if you've got some spares. So first of all, Sanghagita will talk about her slogan. I'll talk afterwards. I forgot to give Dimitri's birthday card. Apologies.
So what you've got on your card there is, I think it says, gather all blames onto one. And that is a version of the slogan. I prefer to use the version of drive all blames into one. For me, that just seems much more kind of energetic, but they can both work in the same way. But I'm going to use the version drive all blames into one. So what is the one that we drive all these blames into? Well, I'll talk about that later, keep you hanging for a bit. But blame. Something bad happens. So we're being blamed. We're blaming others for this bad thing that's happened. We're blaming ourselves. And we're just blaming, or we could be just blaming a situation, or we could be blaming life. This slogan is something we can grab hold of, something we can remember when we're in blame. Oh yeah, I'm lost in blame. It's all kind of really horrible, and I'm feeling one of these, and I'm lost in it. Drive all blames into one. Oh yeah, what does that mean? What do I do? And then with the work that we're going to do with this slogan, we get our sanity back. We begin again to see clearly. When we're lost in the blame, the slogan brings us back to something sane. And we need to perhaps do it again and again. But blame is hardwired into the human system, unfortunately. So something bad happens and immediately, flash, we're in blame. We're hardwired to stay safe, and we're kind of on the lookout for danger all the time. And that's bad. You keep away. You're not me. Then we can feel safer. That's bad. Keep away. Blame it. Name it. Keep away from me. Keep myself safe. Or even blaming ourselves alerts us that, oh, I've done something wrong. I mustn't do that again. Otherwise, I'll be excluded from the pack. So, and also blaming situations, blaming life is a way of trying to explain our suffering. Oh, it must be because of that. And then I need to fix that thing. So this is going on all the time. It's going on all the time. And in a way, we can't help it. In a way, it's just hardwired. But also, it's cultivated by our upbringing. You know, when all my children, when they were little, if they fell over or banged their toe on a table, I'd say, naughty table. You know, we do, don't we? Naughty table, naughty floor for making you cry. And somehow it kind of makes you feel better to blame the thing that hurt them. It somehow is comforting. And society also needs something to blame, someone to blame. And in a way, that's necessary, isn't it? You know, improvements in safety at work and things like that are very, very important. And people should be held accountable for their wrongdoing. People should be held accountable. That's not what we're talking about. What we're talking about here is the movement in the mind that we can take responsibility for. This movement in the mind towards blame that only makes things worse. So this is our starting point. This is the starting point of the 7-point mind training, that we are not slaves to this. We can train our minds to work with this in a way that frees us from blame. You know, and we want to do that, don't we? Because blame brings about anger, hatred. You're stupid, I'm stupid. You're irresponsible, I'm stupid, I'm irresponsible. It fuels hatred. Blame fuels hatred. But the thing is, it's based on that mistake. It's based on the mistake that we can't help but fall into, which is that there is a separate me and a separate you. So that is the mistake that we're all born into, that there's a separate me and a separate you. And when bad things happen, that makes me feel extremely uncomfortable, and it would make me feel much better if I could blame you for it, or blame me for it, or blame life for it. And it's all based around this idea of being separate. And it's kind of an explanation for our suffering. If it's their fault or my fault, or even if I'm being blamed, it kind of explains, it's an explanation for suffering. So now we're getting closer to what the one is. The wisdom of the mind training helps us to see through this mistake of the separate me and the separate you, to the truth of interconnectedness. Do you remember the intro course that we did, being interrelated? The very first night we came on the intro course, we learned that we are deeply and profoundly interconnected. And the wisdom of this mind training, drive all blames into one, explains suffering in a way that doesn't separate us. So we can attend to our suffering in a way that actually helps. So not on this bad thing that's happening. We don't have to do that. We can attend to the suffering in the situation. I'm going to explain it a way that we can do that. So blame is a symptom of not seeing the truth of interconnectedness, of thinking that there's a separate me and a separate you. And as soon as we're in blame, we know that we're cut off from the truth of interconnectedness. We know we're cut off from that. It's like a big neon sign over our head. You know, as soon as we're in blame, being blamed, blaming others, we know we're cut off from the way things are. So that's really good. It's really good. When we're in blame, we've got this sign that says, you know, that, was it family, what was it? What's the one that goes, Family Fortunes. It's like, as soon as we're in blame, we can go, oh, I'm cut off from interconnectedness. There must be a wrong view going on here. So it's like and that's when we can bring in drive all blames into one. So something bad has happened, blame, drive all blames into one. I am going to come to it. How do we stay in that gap long enough to stop us going into blame? Or if we're already in blame, how do we slow it down? Or how do we get out of it? How do we get out of the anger, hatred, otherness, othering, that kind of the horrible things that arise out of blame, the selfishness? I would never do that. You know, we hear ourselves saying these things, don't we? But it's just a habit. It's just a habit. So drive all blames into one. So the one is traditionally described as this evil spirit of ego clinging. The evil spirit of ego clinging is the one that we drive all these blames into. So this is the arena we're talking about, this mistake of separateness, the mistake of the separate me, the separate you. That's the problem. That's the one that we drive all the blames into. So all of these, blaming others, blaming ourselves, being blamed, blaming life, looking for the answer to our suffering, all of these are opportunities to recognize that we're under the influence of this big mistake of separateness, that we're clinging to a me, clinging to there being a you. And this is the area that we're looking at. We're gathering, in the language of the other one, we're gathering all the energy of blame together and practicing interconnectedness. Yay! Wow, isn't that amazing? That is to have a practice where you practice interconnectedness. I think that's just absolutely amazing. So this makes us kinder, makes us more generous, makes us less reactive. Who wouldn't want this? But the thing is, it is quite tempting to stay in blame because it feels sometimes quite good, especially when you can have a rant with someone, you know, and they both think that that person is to blame. It's quite tempting, but it actually in the long term just leads to more suffering. So how do we do it? We value our experience. That's what we do. So I'm going to it's got lots of different names, this, and I'm going to lead us through a version of a practice that we can do when we're reacting. So it's in 3 parts. And the thing is that with this practice that we value the experience of blame. It's like, wow, thank you, I've got this thing, and I'm going to practice with it. This is an amazing opportunity. And we see how important these opportunities of blame are, and we see them as an opportunity to practice. So there's 3 main things that we do. In meditation is the best opportunity. To be able to do this in meditation is the best time, but it can be done on the hoof, and especially the first 2 bits of it. So the first bit is we see and we say. So we see I'm in blame. I'm reacting. I'm having a reaction, and it's blame. There's blame going on, and I say it out loud. You can say it actually out loud. I'm having a reaction. I'm blaming them. I'm blaming myself. You know, say it out loud, so that you all kind of blame. You know, you just say the word blame. Just say it out loud. And recognize to yourself, this is an opportunity for practice. So it's not about being skillful. It's not about being skillful or unskillful. It's not about that. It's about what's actually happening to us when we batten down into the delusion of separateness. So what's actually happening in this, not about skillfulness. We don't have to think about the precepts. In fact, we don't want to think particularly just yet about anything. Everything, so we see and say, oh, right, I'm in blame. Everything I need is here. Blame and a human body. That's all I need. That's all I need. And so that's the first bit, see and say. Then the next bit is along with the noticing of the blame will be lots of physical symptoms. We will have a lot of physical sensations going on. There will be lots of gut churning going on. When you're being blamed, I get this, when I'm being blamed for something, especially if I haven't done it, I get this horrible hot kind of thing down my back and down my legs. And it's like, it makes me go, ugh, you know, that kind of horrible gut thing. I get, if I'm blaming someone else, often it's around here, it's in my throat. So in your gut, in your bowels, in your legs, in your throat, wherever it might be, feel into that. That's the second part of it. The first part, see and say, know you're in blame. Second bit, feel it. So we're not thinking, we're unhooking from the story. The story is actually irrelevant. It's got nothing to do with the story. What's going on in you is probably being triggered by something completely different. It's got nothing to do with the story. So unhook from the story about what they did, what I did, what life should be doing for me. Unhook from that and get into the body. Get into the body. And you can just kind of stand or sit or whatever it might be. If you're in meditation, it's a great opportunity, but you don't have to be. And what's happening here is we're connecting with energies that aren't expressed when we're stuck in blame. Because when we're in blame, we're like this, and it feels horrible. We still have the feelings are still there, but we're not listening to them. We're up in papancha, stories going round and round and round, when the body's going, hello, I'm trying to tell you something here, and we're like not listening to that. I'm in the story. So what we need to connect with those energies, and then get them available to us. So that might be painful, might be physically painful, but with practice we can get to understand and know our bodies a bit better. And we stay in the felt experience, not associated with thoughts. We're not looking for the feelings associated with the thoughts. We're not doing that. We're in the feelings that are already there, that are arising, the actual sensations in the body that are arising in the body. Could be fizzing, could be painful. Follow those feelings through right to their end. And sometimes it can feel very uncomfortable, but hugely worth it. So see and say, feel, and the next bit is allow a space for inquiry. So that's the third bit of it, to allow a space for inquiry. So, and allow what intuitions and understandings might arise when you're really in your body and your mind is quieter. So an inquiry might say, why am I so upset? You know, what's going on? What am I defending? Why am I so upset? What is being threatened in this experience? And like I say, meditation is ideal. So you can actually go to your meditation with a wish to try and understand something a bit more deeply. So the inquiry will be kind of related to the feelings, but then you'll start to ask, just allow a space for an inquiry to start to arise. So we can arrive at a place where we're not lost in the story. When we start to really pay attention, and we know this from our own experience of meditation, when we really pay attention, what's there is metta. When we're really giving full attention to what needs attention, metta is there automatically. It just is there. And so paying attention gets us out of thinking and into the felt experience when we're not clinging to the story. So we when we spend some time in that experience, alive in that experience, we start to notice that if we can bring a bigger dharmic perspective to what's going on, when we say that the perspective that is naturally loving, and we are in touch with the metta that will naturally arise, there is no separate me and there is no separate you. And then we can go back into that situation, perhaps, with a wiser, more loving point of view, because we've given these energies the attention that's blocked when we're in blame. And we might need to go back again and again and again and again. And somebody was going to time me. Oh, yeah. 17, again and again. So the more we practice, the more we can attend to our own reactions, the more we can bring a loving awareness to our own and others' reactions. So we see and say, we feel, and we allow a space for inquiry. So with practice, this can take us all the way to seeing the truth of interconnectedness, to a mind that is completely free of blame, and just a loving, open, spacious mind. And I just want to do my example. So I've got so many examples of blame, and I'm not going to use the road rage one, which I overuse, and it's boring, and I'm still doing it. But this one, I feel like I've cracked. So BBC Radio 4 newsreaders should speak properly. And when they don't, I don't like it. So there's this thing that they keep doing where instead of saying a feather or a camera, they say a feather or a camera. So where does this come from? What's happened to Suddenly it's a this, a that, a the other. And I think it's a technique to help them slow down or something. But anyway, I'm like, oh. Why are they doing it? Why? I'd be having a really lovely radio experience if it wasn't for that person saying A all the time. Blame, 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 blame. Notice, see and say, I'm in blame, drive all blames into one, feel. And when I did that, when I really, really sat and allowed the inquiry to come up, I realized that it was a question of safety. Things are changing on Radio 4, and they're not like they used to be. And people suddenly starting changing the way they speak makes me feel unsafe. But there is no safety to be found in the way Radio 4 readers say their things. So it's a complete nonsense. So once I really saw that, what was underneath my irritation, it just went poof. So that's an example of how that can work. And so now I can hear it, and every time they say this, and I can just smile at myself and know that I have kind of helped that to dissipate a little bit. And that will have benefit for not just me, but for people around me as well. And I don't have to write angry from Norfolk Park letters to Radio 4 anymore. Anyway, that's my talk.
So, yeah, the slogan I'm going to talk about is always have the support of a cheerful mind. And some translations have always have the support of a joyful mind, or always rely on a joyful mind or cheerful mind. So different translations, but the one we've got on our card, always have the support of a cheerful mind. I think this is a very, very practical way you can help yourself and other people. If you can train your mind to cultivate more positive emotion, more cheer, more joy, well, it will really, really benefit you, but it will also have a big impact on the people that you come into contact with. So I talked about the Dhammapada at the beginning in the introduction, and the very first phrase of the Buddha's teachings in the Dhammapada, this collection of the Buddha's teachings, is that our experiences are produced by our mind and they're led by our mind. So if we speak or act with a mind that is unskillful, that's blaming perhaps, or other unskillful thoughts, we will suffer and we'll create suffering for ourselves and others. But if we can speak or act with a mind that's skillful, that's pure, then happiness will follow, joy will follow, like a shadow that never leaves us, the Buddha says. So we've got a choice there. And it is a choice, and maybe it's a choice over time, but we can train our mind to become more skillful and less unskillful. We can train our mind, we can notice when our mind blames or is resentful or anxious or jealous or all these other difficult states, negative states that cause suffering. We can notice that, and we can train and we can cultivate our mind and our heart in all kinds of positive, skillful mental states. And if we do that, it really will benefit you, because you will dwell in a completely different world. Actually, the world we dwell in is created by our mind. And it's true to say, we hear this on the week 2 of the intro course. You'll all heard this, that our mind creates our experience. So if you can cultivate a positive, skillful, pure mind, you just live your mind different, and your experience of the world is radically different. You live in a more beautiful place, full of more beautiful people. So if you can train your mind in joy, it's a treasure. It's like having a treasure. Your mind makes you rich and wealthy with spiritual wealth. You just feel abundance and contentment. You don't feel a lack that you need to fill through craving. You've already got enough. You've already got the joy and the cheer of a positive mind. I mean, and this is this incredible. What an amazing thing to train in. So I think this is a wonderful slogan. And what I want to do is to make a few points about it and just talk about a couple of friends of mine that have cheerful minds that have really benefited me. So what to say? First thing to say is that this isn't talking about being in denial about the suffering in the world, because there's lots of suffering in your life and in other people's lives. That's a fact that the Buddha taught, the suffering, the dukkha in life. It's not pretending to be happy and just kind of painting a smile. I'm really happy, I'm really cheerful and joyful, there's no suffering. That's been misunderstanding. That's not what's meant. It's having a heart that has the capacity to dwell, to be with other people's suffering and your own suffering. But there's an equanimity where your positivity isn't diminished by that. You're not knocked over by that. You're not dragged into a state of anxiety or overwhelm or worry. You've got enough positivity to be able to really actually take on board the suffering of another person and to be a support to them. So it's an equanimity that isn't. Equanimity sometimes can sound a bit cool, as though you're not feeling anything really because you're just equanimous. Actually, the equanimity is a really positive, loving, skillful, joyful heart, no matter what's happening, even in the face of suffering and adversity. Of course, there'll be sadness and compassion when there is suffering, but there's also where you can train yourself to be aware of beauty and joy in the world as well as the suffering, because there's a tendency with the news and the media and my mind, unfortunately, just to notice all the things that are wrong, all the things that are going wrong, all the things that I'm doing wrong, all of my faults, all the faults in the world, and to worry about it and get anxious about it. And that's prapancha that Sanghagita talked about. The Buddha gave an analogy about being shot with an arrow. When there's dukkha and there's something isn't right in your life and you're suffering, it's as though you're wounded with an arrow, but our response to it can often be like adding a second arrow. All the mental events and the activity, like blame and the other things that we can do in our mind, creates more suffering. So rather than doing all of that, we can train ourselves to notice what's good, what we can celebrate, what we can be joyful about in the world, as well as what is difficult and where the suffering is. And it's easy. It's easy to be cheerful and joyful when things are going your way. Anybody can do that. And you might hear some cheers and some joy in, England are playing tonight. So Sangha night's a little bit diminished in the numbers. But you might hear celebration. You hear people going, "Hooray!" if England score. People will be full of joy. They'll be cheering. They'll be cheerful. And it's easy to be happy when things are going well, when the worldly winds are blowing in your favour. So we've heard at Sangha night about these 4 pairs of worldly winds, which is gain and loss, pleasure and pain, fame and infamy, and status and lack of status, or praise and blame. I think praise and blame. So they're the 4 pairs. And when they're going your way, great, you'll be joyful and cheerful. But this slogan says, always have the support of a cheerful mind. So that means even when the worldly winds aren't blowing in your favour, you can have the support of a cheerful mind. And part of that comes from having a bigger perspective, the wise perspective of realising that the worldly winds aren't a safe refuge, as Sanghagita mentioned earlier. We can't rely on Radio 4 to give us safety. We can't rely on football, sadly, to give us safety and protection. It's not a safe refuge. What we can rely on is training our mind, and we can rely on the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha. They are safe refuges. So if we're de-investing from the worldly winds, our mind can be naturally more cheerful and more joyful. We can rely on that. even when the worldly winds aren't going in our favour. And I think Sanghagita really exemplified this earlier. Also, through mind training, we can see adversity and challenge as an opportunity, and we can be delighted. Oh, great. I've noticed something that's causing me suffering. I've noticed a second arrow that I've been causing me pain all this time. I can remove it. I can train myself not to do this anymore. And that's going to be amazing. So we can have cheer and joy and delight in the face of adversity. And if we know that there's a bigger picture, a bigger perspective, which is, well, we're also doing this because it benefits all beings, it benefits other people, and might lead to my liberation and the liberation of others. Well, then training our mind in the face of adversity can bring you joy, actually, and cheer. So that's the why. And I want to just give a couple of examples briefly of friends of mine who really exemplified this, because I've learned in this past week, actually, that I can't rely always on my own mind to be joyful and cheerful. I can't rely on that at the moment. I've done a lot of work and it's a lot more cheerful than it used to be. But still, I can be prone towards noticing what's wrong in my own life and kind of getting drawn into those negative states. It's interesting, my wife this morning, she's going out to work, said, good luck with the talk, always rely on a joyful mind, and kind of smiled and laughed. And I sat to Jyoti when she said, oh, we're giving you the slogan to talk about. She kind of had a smile and a laugh. And I thought, okay, I could do with taking this on board and having more of a cheerful mind and more of a joyful mind. So I can't always rely on my own mind, but I found I can rely on friends. Because usually most of my friends will have a cheerful mind, even if I haven't. And sometimes I can do that for them as well. I can have a cheerful mind and a joyful mind when they haven't. And sometimes just meeting my friends makes me joyful and cheerful. Not just actually being in their company makes me happy. Knowing that we've got this amazing shared thing we're doing with our lives is amazing. It just makes me so happy just to see my friends and even just to think of them sometimes. So having friends that either can bring positivity into your life by their practice, or you have this shared life that brings joy into your life, I can't recommend that highly enough. So the first example I want to talk about is a friend who was cheerful in the face of extreme adversity. And this was my friend Dharmapalita. And there's a picture of Dharmapalita here on the lectern smiling at me. And that is how he was all the time, is cheerful and joyful and smiling at me. And Dharmapalita was a man he came to the Dharma already very sick, very early. He had a very serious lung condition, and his prognosis was he's only going to live for another year or 2 years. And this is when he just came to the Buddhist center. And he ended up outliving his prognosis by a very long time, kind of like 10, 12 years, and baffling the doctors. And his name, protected by the Dharma, Dharmapalita, kind of partly symbolised that when he was ordained. But he never complained about his health. He was in a lot of discomfort and pain all the time. He had a tube going into his heart that just pumped steroids into his heart to keep him alive all the time. And he would lead meditation sessions with this little machine wrapped up in a blanket. And he'd come along to classes, and he'd be concerned about other people. He'd ask about other people. So it's this capacity to be focused on other people made him happy, rather than focusing on his health and how bad it was would make him miserable. So why do that? Why not? Instead, let's focus on other people. And that's what he did with his life, and it made him happy. And I was in a chapter with him, and which is where older members meet in smaller groups. And he never complained about his health, even when he was very close to dying. Very matter of fact about it. And I remember when he was dying, I went to visit him in hospital, and it might make me upset to talk about it, we'll see. But basically, my final memory of going to see Dharmapalita in hospital as he was dying of his lung condition was how happy he was to see me. He just was so full of joy to see me. And can't you stay a bit longer? And I couldn't stay a bit longer because I had to look after my kids. I just kind of called in to see him for what was going to be the last time. And we both knew it was going to be the last time. And as I left the hospital, I turned around to look at him, and he's just beaming. His face was full of joy and cheer. So he lived this life full of cheer and full of joy. He's someone who really trained in this and had a real gift for this, a real quality for this. But what an example, just to always have a cheerful and joyful mind. Amazing. And then another friend who exemplifies this for me, and exemplifies how a friend can lift you out of your own negativity through their cheerfulness, is Amoghavanksa. the great Amoghavangsa, who's at the back of Sangha night tonight. And when I first started coming to the Buddhist Centre, and I'd go to retreat centres, usually to Padmaloka, and I say I was from Sheffield, and people say, "Oh, do you know Amoghavangsa?" And Amoghavangsa was just known by so many people and loved by so many people because he would just bring cheer into people's life and joy. So they'd love to be on retreat with him, or to know him, or to keep in touch with him, because he would bring joy and cheer and playfulness and positivity. And many times I would go to meet with Amoghavangsa in quite a kind of negative, I'd arrive in quite a negative state, anxious, worried about stuff. And very, very quickly, just from being in his presence, I'd be lifted out of that, and I'd leave happy and cheerful and full of joy, with my mind kind of focused on the positive things in life and the potential and the possibility. So he's an example for someone who's trained in this, actually, and his cheerfulness and his joyful mind can lift me out of my own kind of negativity at times, and has helped to train me in that, so I can do that more and more for other people, and for each other we do that. And it's a delight to have a friend who can do that, and who you can rely on to cheer you up and to bring joy into your life. So I think, to end, I would say, what I would say is that it's a good measure of your progress in the Dharma life is, can you, when things don't go your way, can you remain upbeat and cheerful and joyful in the face of that? And if you can't, you've got further to go, and we've always got further to go. But in the commentaries, they talk about this as a measure of effective practice. If your mind training practice is really effective, you can see that you can always rely on a cheerful mind, on a joyful mind. And if you can't, then maybe you can rely on your friends and their cheerful mind and their joyful mind. So how to end? Basically, just going back to the idea of the Bodhisattva who wants other people to not suffer. Their practices for themselves, to liberate themselves, but also to liberate other people. So having a cheerful mind really, really does benefit you. If you can train yourself to notice the things that are going well, and this is something Amoghavangsa says he will do. He'll let people have a bit of a moan, and then he'll say to them, "Well, what's going well?" And then they'll start to talk about what's going well, and then they'll cheer up, or just to get them to talk about the thing that they love in their life or are passionate about, and then they'll cheer up. So a Bodhisattva will want to connect with other people and to lift them out of their suffering. And we can do that for each other through our friendships. And if you can train yourself to always have the support of a cheerful mind or a joyful mind, then that will be a vast treasure. Your mind will be a treasure for you. You will be rich, and you'll bring that richness into the lives of the people around you. Thank you.